In Chandrayan 1, India was aiming for the first time to go beyond the Earth.
What really happened to the Vikram lander?
Vikram lander actually has crash landed. When you call mission life, the mission life comes because of the fuel which you are carrying.
Why only lunar South Pole was targeted for exploration, sir?
We want to study the moon and we want to go to other planetary system from going to the moon first. In the Apollo mission, they had 6 times descended on the moon. They walked on the moon. 12 astronauts actually did lot of experiments.
Any possibility of life on the moon?
Absolutely, there is no possibility of finding life on moon. Surviving on the moon is also very, very tough. So moon has become a great destination and lot of activities are happening around.
We have Dr. S M Ahmed with us. He got his PhD from PRL Ahmedabad 1990. Presently heading the Central Instruments Laboratory as Principal Scientific Officer at the University of Hyderabad from the year 2009. He has held various positions such as Associate Professor 1 in IPR Gandhinagar, Research Associate in NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Visiting Scientist in Swiss Federal Institute, and many more. He joined ISRO's most ambitious Chandrayan 1 project in the year 2004 and developed a quadruple-based mass spectrometer CHACE, which worked successfully in the Moon Impact Probe mission. Prestigious positions. He has spoken at TEDx High-Tech City, Hyderabad in the year 2010, and he has won Suryadatta National Award in the year 2011. And his interests are science popularization. Welcome to Science Hub. What are the objectives of Mission Chandrayan 1?
So in Chandrayan 1, India was aiming for the first time to go beyond the Earth. So ISRO has been doing exceedingly well in building polar satellite launch vehicles and polar satellites and geosynchronous satellites. So it was for the first time they decided that we will do beyond this, and that category falls under a subject called planetary exploration. So in that planetary exploration, the nearest neighbor beyond Earth is Moon, and going to the Moon, their aspiration or their plans, their objective was actually to be able to reach Moon. Reaching the Moon itself has its own challenges, its own problems. I'll give you a simple example. So polar satellite, if you want to drop, it will just be 500 kilometers. Geosynchronous satellite, 36,000 kilometers. If you want to go to the Moon, it is 4 lakh plus kilometers. So from 36,000 kilometers, if you want to go to 4 lakh kilometers, so you need, the very first thing you need is you need a very powerful rocket. That powerful rocket was a challenge. Similarly, what science you will do, that was another challenge. So in Chandrayan 1, reaching the Moon was a big deal, and then what science you want to do was the second problem or second issue they were facing. They were all prepared very well to answer both of these issues.
When and from where Chandrayan 1 was launched?
Chandrayan 1 was launched in September 2008 from Sriharikota, and it took around 11 days to reach the Moon.
And how long Chandrayan 1 mission life was?
Yeah, so Chandrayan 1, technically speaking, it was planned for 2 years. It was to work for 2 years. But it just so happened that within 11 months of launching, it worked for 11 months. There was a problem, and that problem later it was identified was due to a power supply for the control unit, a kind of a computer which controls the entire spacecraft. That particular power supply unit malfunctioned, and hence the mission was aborted in 11 months. Even though the spacecraft kept on revolving, as I'm speaking to you, Chandrayan 1 is revolving around the Moon, but it is in a way kind of brain dead.
How many scientific instruments Chandrayan 1 carried on board, and in which how many payloads belong to India?
As I told you in the beginning, there was a big issue of what science would you like to do on the moon. So India was not quite prepared to do a whole lot of science. So they came up with a fantastic idea that why should we not involve the international players also. So in that plan, what they did was they called for the best players in space industry, and NASA, European Space Agency, and Japan, including Europe. So all of them brought 6 instruments, and we call them payloads. And India carried 5 instruments. So total of 11 instruments, out of which more than what we carried, the Americans and European instruments were there. And it was so great that this policy was adopted, because one of the American instrument was the one which has got the credit of finding water on the moon. So it was a great success as far as doing science is concerned.
Did all the goals of Mission Chandrayan 1 met, sir?
Okay, this question is kind of how you look at at the problem at hand. So as I was telling, symbolically going to the moon itself was a big deal, and for a country like India, which has never has gone beyond the geosynchronous orbit, going to the moon was a very big deal. And then we said that we have designed it for 2 years, and it worked only for 11 months. So it is up to the people to decide the goals have been met or not. However, let me give you a technical answer. Technical answer is the following. So we went to the moon, and then we were revolving around the moon, and we were to cover as the moon itself is rotating, and then you were revolving in a polar orbit, and then you will be covering the moon. So there is a camera, visible camera, which will look at the moon. So in those 11 months, the Chandrayan 1 has sent huge amount of data, a camera called terrain mapping camera. So it's a stereotypic camera which will give depth perception also. And even though the 100% of the moon surface was not covered, maybe it was anywhere between 70 to 80%. So all the 5 instruments sent by India worked. Of course, the other 6 instruments from the other agencies worked. Everything worked. Only thing was, it worked only for 11 months. So it is up to you to decide the success rate. In my view, it has done a great job.
Why did we actually go to the moon?
Okay, so if you're asking question why moon and other planet, so the moment you want to go beyond Earth, the first challenge is to be able to have a carrier vehicle. So the rocket which will take you. So the easiest thing to go beyond Earth was going to the moon. Even though I told you it is 36,000 kilometers versus 4 lakh kilometers, or let us say 4,000 versus 4 lakh. So which is 100 times much beyond the geosynchronous orbit. So if you want to go anything beyond moon, the nearest other objects would be let's say Venus or planet Mars. So eventually India did go to planet Mars later, but going to moon was the easiest thing to do, and that's why we chose to go to the moon.
And is there any possibility of life on the moon?
Okay, absolutely there is no possibility of finding life on moon, and I think we should discuss little more in details since you asked this question. The reason nothing can survive on moon is because moon does not have any atmosphere. There is no atmosphere on the moon, and since there is no atmosphere, there is no water, there are no lakes, nothing on the moon. It's a barren land. Let us say I'll take you and drop you on Thar desert. So it's just something like Thar desert. If you go to Thar desert, in the daytime during summer, it is around 50 degrees centigrade. In the night time, it all gets cooled down. It will almost go to 10 degrees or 5 degrees centigrade. On the moon, it is slightly different. First of all, you don't have atmosphere, no nitrogen, no oxygen, nothing. It's vacuum, so no life can survive. And the temperature on the moon is, if you look at the sun, when the moon is exposed to the sun, the temperature is around 100 degrees or so. It's almost boiling in the daytime of the moon. When the sun sets on the moon, on the night time, it is almost minus 120 degrees centigrade. So even if you want to go tomorrow, humans, we want to go and survive on the moon, first of all, since there is no atmosphere, we have to carry our own oxygen and other things. And then we also have to bear this huge temperature change. So not only there is no life on moon, Surviving on the moon is also very, very tough. You can only survive as long as you have your oxygen stored with you.
Is it we see the entire moon or only one side of the moon, sir?
Okay, so how much of the moon you see is all a perception. It is a perception. That is, as moon is revolving around the earth, depending on which part of the earth you are there, and then earth itself is rotating around the sun. So because of this combination, you will see different parts of the moon. There is one typical issue related to moon, and that is called synchronous movement of the moon around earth. So as the moon revolves around earth, it rotates on its own axis. Now the rotation time of the moon and revolving time of the moon around earth is same. That being same, the only problem on earth we face is we will see only one part of the moon. That is why our grandmother, our parents and all have been saying that there is a palm tree, beneath the palm tree one lady is sitting having a small child and all. It's only to say that as moon is revolving and rotating around earth with the same speed, so it's called synchronously locked movement around earth. So you see only one part of the moon, that is called near side of the moon. So humans had never seen on the back side of the moon, it is called far side of the moon. Only once the spacecraft went and revolved around the moon, they found out or they saw what is there on the other side of the moon.
What are the similarities between the moon and the earth?
Actually, there are none if you are asking me this question. Geologically, if you see, even though earth and moon have been formed 4.5 billion years ago, and so the material wise, that is geology wise, they are same. Beyond that, there is nothing which is same. So when I said same geologically, actually I said the material with which either earth is made or moon is made up of. However, the way moon got cooled down, and there is a theory which says that moon is formed because of one object coming and colliding with earth, and then because of earth's gravity it got attracted towards earth and revolving around earth. But everything is part of solar system. Still, this particular theory need to be proved, whether moon was part of the earth or a foreign body came collided with earth, which is the accepted theory now. So that way geologically they have some similarities. Beyond that, not having any atmosphere, very dry, and nothing much to compare on what we have. So we are very lucky that we are living on this beautiful blue pearl kind of thing which you see from space. We have a huge biodiversity. Moon has nothing on it. It's all barren.
And how much is the distance between the moon and the earth?
Yeah, so moon actually revolves around earth in an elliptical orbit. So moon comes very close to earth at some time and goes much away. So because of this, the distances will vary. So if you calculate the average distance between earth and moon, it turns out to be roughly around 3,84,000 kilometers.
And how much is the time taken to reach the moon?
Yeah, so there are different ways by which you can actually go to the moon, and the way India went was a very different way, purely because the launch vehicle which India had was PSLV, and PSLV has its capacity to launch the spacecraft into an orbit, and then with India slowly try to raise the orbit and get captured by the moon. That is how India went. And that took around it will take around 9 to 11 days. In the case of Chandrayaan 2, we took much more than 11 days. It took us almost 28 or 26 days. Now talk about countries like NASA. NASA had a very, very powerful rocket, and it will just in one go, the orbit in which it can actually propel the spacecraft is much away, much further, and because of that, they took, I think, just I need to be corrected, just around one and a half day to 2 days.
What are the objectives of Chandrayan Mission 2, sir?
Okay, in Chandrayaan 2, India had one big objective. That objective was, can we land on the moon? It's called soft landing. In Chandrayaan 1 also, we had one particular mission, and I was part of that mission that was called Moon Impact Probe. The Moon Impact Probe was President Kalam's pet project, where President Kalam had told that when you go to the moon, just don't revolve around the moon and try to embrace the moon. That Moon Impact Probe went and collided on the south pole of the moon. That's all it did. And it got finished the moment it collided on the south pole. So in Chandrayaan 2, India wanted to tell it to the world that we will land on the moon and will perform experiments also. So by performing experiments, I mean they will actually slowly they will land, in a controlled way they will land, and they will have a rover, and that rover will move around and then do experiments. That was the main objective. Apart from that, ISRO also had an orbiter. So what was the plan? The plan was actually to go and revolve around the moon, which was an orbiter, and then send a lander called Vikram. Vikram was a lander, and that will go and land at the south pole. And then there was a rover called Pragyan, which will come out of this lander, and then it will do experiment for 2 weeks. That was the plan.
Oh, that's really great, sir. What is the difference between Chandrayaan 1 and Chandrayaan 2 goals?
Yeah, okay. So Chandrayaan 1 was basically to be able to reach the moon. And I have to tell you something, how amazing India did this project as compared to many other. I'm not saying that we are the superpowers. I'm only trying to say that the hardships and whatever planning was done was so great. So there was a mission by NASA called Ranger 1. In Ranger 1, during 1961 to 65, US made 9 attempts. In those 9 attempts, continuously they had 6 failures. Only 3 times they could reach the moon. You take the case of India in Chandrayaan 1, India had only 1 attempt and then they reached the moon. So in the very first attempt, reaching moon was a big deal, and that was some kind of a goal India had set, apart from doing some science experiments. But they were not so much hell-bent on doing a great deal of science. That's why they named Chandrayaan 1 called technology demonstration kind of a mission. Now coming back to Chandrayaan 2, India did not take any help from any country either for launching or for doing science. So India carried 8 instruments their own on the orbiter and another 6 experiments on the lander. So that way it was very, very different, Chandrayaan 2, and they wanted to do more science and they wanted to actually send a rover to the moon.
Can you give the details of scientific instruments that are involved in the Chandrayaan 2 project, sir?
Yeah, so Chandrayaan 2 scientific instruments, I must say, all these instruments were all built by ISRO and no help was taken, none actually for that matter. So they had they had 8 instruments on the orbiter and 6 instruments on the rover and on the lander. So they had almost 14 instruments, out of which it so turned out that the lander had a problem and it could not land properly, and hence those 6 instruments were not put to use. All the 8 instruments which were on the orbiter have all been designed and they have been working exceedingly well. Since I'm basically a trained instrument scientist, I can go into the greater details of these instruments. So in these 8 instruments, you have cameras. These cameras are the similar one which we had in Chandrayaan 1, terrain mapping cameras, which are stereotypic cameras, which will give a depth perception. That is, let's say if I actually image a crater, I can actually see the depth perception of the crater. So those were cameras. They also carried one unique camera called Orbital High Resolution Camera. Now the beauty of Orbital High Resolution Camera is, as Chandrayaan 2 orbiter is revolving at 100 kilometer polar orbit, from 100 kilometer orbit, they are looking at the moon, especially they want to look at North Pole and South Pole, that is in Orbital High Resolution Camera, and they are getting an image at a spatial resolution of 25 centimeters. That means if some vehicle is moving on South Pole or North Pole, not only I can identify which make that vehicle is, I can also almost say that what are the tires and what is all the details as small as quarter of a meter. Never in the history of moon anybody has studied moon at quarter of a meter spatial resolution. All the other spacecrafts from Europe or US, they all have been studied at 1 meter, Recently, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter from USA has actually gone very close to the moon, around 60 kilometers, and that is sampling at 1 meter or slightly less than 1 meter, but nowhere close to quarter meter. That's a fantastic instrument. And the best part is that camera is working. It has sent lots and lots of data, and they want to see the permanently shadowed regions on North Pole and South Pole. Apart from the cameras, they also carried lot of spectrometers. Spectrometers will give information about minerals on the moon. So as I am revolving on around the moon, these spectrometers will tell what all type of minerals are there on the moon. These minerals are very important for geologists to be able to find out how the moon has formed as such, minerals, which type of minerals are all there. So there are 2 to 3 instruments which will study about the minerals. There is one very excellent, very special instrument which was attempted by NASA and which ISRO also is carrying, is a special radar which will actually send the radio signals and then measure the reflected radio signals, and hence be able to see if there is any water buried in North Pole or South Pole of the moon. So these type of 3 category of instruments which are doing very advanced science right at the forefront of science and technology.
Is there any specific reason to name Vikram the lander of Chandrayan 2?
Yeah. So ISRO, we all know that the founder member of Indian Space Research Organization was actually Vikram Sarabhai. So Vikram Sarabhai is actually a visionary who was almost brought in just few years post independence, and he is the one who dreamt of taking India into the field where all the distant locations all should be connected via satellites. So Vikram Sarabhai's dream was, if I can actually build a very good satellite system, then I can connect my very vast country. That was his dream. In fact, in his wildest dreams, Vikram Sarabhai would have never thought that India will go to the moon. Going to the moon was a big deal, and in such a short time. And so I like to go back to Vikram Sarabhai, who was the founder member scientist who was working in America. Upon the special invitation from the then government, he came back to India, and then he set up a physical research laboratory. I just happened to do my PhD from that institute. And then from there, that physical research laboratory is the mother of ISRO. From there, various centers of ISRO, which we see now, around 7 to 8 centers, they propagated. So when they were actually to land on the moon, so giving kind of a tribute to the father of the Indian space program, they named the lander as Vikram.
I want to know why only lunar South Pole was targeted for exploration, sir?
Yeah, so that is very interesting to note that moon has got both on the North Pole and South Pole plenty of craters. And since moon is not tilted so much with respect to the axis of the sun, so these craters have never seen sunlight. So there is a theory which says that either on the North Pole or on the South Pole, you can actually have lot of ice buried, water ice. So where did this ice come from? The comets are coming and hitting the moon, and since moon has no atmosphere, the comets can continuously come and hit the moon. So all that cometary hitting would have deposited huge amount of ice into these craters. So these craters are plenty in South Pole and North Pole. You could have gone to North and South. Going to South is just symbolically they went to South. In fact, South is becoming a very important destination, because America is also going to South Pole now later in a program called Artemis. But we have gone much before America. In fact, America would be taking lot of our data to when they want to. In fact, they have sent a mirror along with Chandrayan 2 in the lander they had, just to be able to precisely see where they can land. It so happened that the lander mission did not go well. So South Pole is very important because water reserves could be there.
And what really happened to the Vikram lander?
Vikram lander actually has crash landed. So there was an elaborate plan by ISRO that it should actually decelerate, it will slow down its forward velocity, and slowly it will go and have in a very special way, which is called a special navigation system which will have, it's called closed loop navigation system, in which as you go closer and closer to the surface of the moon, you are hitting the laser, and reflected laser light will tell you, it's called laser altimeter, it will tell you your height. And then in a very closed loop way, you will also had hazard avoidance camera system, which will make sure that you don't land in any of the craters and all that was in place. Somehow something went wrong, and the Vikram lander, which was to land near South Pole, could not land. It actually crash landed.
And can you please briefly tell me about what Rover Pragyan is?
Okay, so Rover Pragyan was symbolically, it was to get off from the lander and then move on the lunar surface at South Pole. And it was carrying its own power, but that was charged, or there were solar panels, so it could be recharged. And as long as the day of the moon, on the moon you have a day lasting 14 days. So the plan was that the Pragyan rover will actually generate its power from the sun and work for those 14 Earth days, which is a single day on the moon. So it also carried 3 fantastic state-of-the-art instruments. So it carried a gamma ray based instrument. What it does is it will shine gamma ray, and the gamma rays will go and actually fall on the surface of the moon, and then the reflected radiation will tell you about the minerals, what kind of mineralogy is there. It also carried a camera which will take a close look and take very nice videography and all, send the data back to Earth. So like that, sending a rover, making the rover work on any foreign body is a very big deal. So India attempted not only for soft landing, they also wanted to play with this rover, and it would have worked. They did lot of experiments, they did lot of simulations on Earth and all, but somehow because of the landing issue, the rover could not be tested on moon.
What is the mission life of orbiter, lander and rover?
Okay, so in Chandrayaan 2, when you call mission life, the mission life comes because of the fuel which you are carrying. So let's say Chandrayaan 2 orbiter is a spacecraft right now. It is revolving around the moon. So there is a continuous struggle between moon's gravity and you are placing yourself in that orbit. So the gravity is continuously pulling you, and then what you have to do is, to be able to maintain that orbit, you fire. There are thrusters which will fire, and the thrusters need a fuel. So if you don't fire, if you don't have fuel, then the gravity will win and it will capture you, then you will collapse on the body, foreign body. It could be Mars, in this case it is moon. So depending on the fuel which you are left with, the same fuel you are using to raise the orbit when you left Earth, and then to be able to, after you captured with the moon, you want to shrink the orbit. So you have used lot of fuel. Depending upon how much fuel you are left with after reaching the moon, your life on that object will be decided. I'll give you one example. In the case of planet Mars, they said that they will exhaust with all the fuel and they'll be able to sustain that orbit on Mars for 6 months. Today we have just completed 7 years on planet Mars. Still there is a little bit of fuel so that you can orbit around Mars. So similarly, for Chandrayaan 2, in a recent meeting, they said that they have fuel so that they can sustain around the moon for more than 2 to 3 years. So I'm sure it will go more than 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years.
What are the challenging aspects of Chandrayaan 2 mission, sir?
Okay, so the Chandrayaan mission as such, let's say for going to the moon. So the biggest problem, as I told in my very first point, is that to be able to reach the moon. To be able to reach the moon, it requires enormous amount of planning. What kind of planning? Planning is because your rockets will have a capability to launch you in some orbit. And then there is a team called mission team. That mission team will raise the orbit, and it will know very precisely that when the moon is coming in their orbit. So when the moon comes in their orbit, what you have to do is, you need to be captured by the moon. How do you capture? There are no brakes on the spacecraft. The only way to apply the brakes on the spacecraft is actually change the orientation of the spacecraft. So you change the orientation of the spacecraft in such a way that you start circling around that object. So, and then you will be captured. In this mission sequence, if you make a very small mistake, you will never be captured by the moon. In fact, in the case of Mars, it was very painful. You make a very small mistake, you are finished.
And what are the new findings or the data that we have received from the Chandrayan mission?
Yeah. So recently, 1 week ago, there was a meeting where ISRO has released all the data, or they declared that the 2 years of data which ISRO scientists have actually found, have seen, they have made that data available for the Indian scientists working in moon mission or planetary missions. And by now they have also published almost half a dozen papers in the international journals, where the most prominent work was actually measured by one infrared imaging spectrometer by Space Application Center, Ahmedabad, where they said that till now the water, which was small amount of water molecules which are revolving, which was actually present around the moon, was actually identified by NASA's instrument, but with some doubts, ifs and doubts. So for the first time, Chandrayaan 2 instrument, they carried an instrument which was superior than what NASA had carried in 2009, and they have said that there are no ifs and buts. For sure, there is a good amount of water droplets which are there on the moon. These water droplets could be origin of that water could be at the South Pole or North Pole, and hence that water is evaporating and just present around the moon. That is one of the very biggest result which the Chandrayaan 2 has brought. Similarly, lot of very highly refined mineral data is being measured by the spectrometers. That data is also published. More than that, now the 2 years of data is available to all the scientists who are not part of the ISRO. So there is a very good scope for Indian scientists to bring very good results in the coming months.
Globally, how many times the space centers succeeded in the moon mission?
Going to the moon after the Apollo program was a big rush. So after the Russia, in fact, in the Cold War era, it was actually Russia and America, and we all know that America won that Cold War by actually landing a human, which is Neil Armstrong. And then in the Apollo mission, they had 6 times they actually descended on the moon. They walked on the moon. 12 astronauts actually did lot of experiments. After that particular race, cold race, which America won in 70s, nothing much was happened. And then slowly Asian countries such as Japan went to the moon and successfully went and did lot of experiments on the moon. After Japan, Europeans got together and formed European Space Agency. So they sent one spacecraft called SMART, and which was an ion propulsion spacecraft. Slowly it went, but for sure it went and revolved around the moon and did lot of experiments. After SMART, the European spacecraft, China 1 year before ISRO in 2007, they sent a spacecraft called Shenzhou. So that also successfully went to the moon and did lot of experiments. India went to the moon in 2008. So similarly, many America and European agency and Japan, they are all now making many attempts. And in fact, in the last 3 years, Trump era had decided that we will go and make a outpost on the south pole of the moon. We want to study the moon and we want to go to other planetary system from going to the moon first. So that program is called Artemis program. So there is a heavy rush now. In fact, the SpaceX, Elon Musk SpaceX has promised that they will take one Japanese person to the moon, and they will take him and revolve him around the moon, bring it back. So like that, there's a lot of interest for even entrepreneurs to go to the moon and do lot of experiments or look at the moon. So moon has become a great destination and lot of activities are happening around moon.
And what are the ISRO's future experiments about, sir?
Okay, so ISRO's future experiments are primarily continuing with Mars. So it could be Mars too. But if you look at immediate plans which was already made public, so these are called Aditya mission, that is going to the sun and studying about Aditya, and then going to Venus and study about Venus. So Sun, Venus, and then continuing with planet Mars. These are the missions ISRO is having to see in the next few years.
Thank you, sir. We wish you all the best in your future projects.
Thank you.